Todo el mundo.
Another.
Hello, I'm Nipper Reed.
And I'm Phil Wolf.
So, settle down, have a nice cup of tea, and enjoy the Venomous Exchange Radio podcast.
Crumpets, Nipper. I want the crumpets.
Well, as you've been such an extraordinarily good boy. Hello, folks. Welcome to our inaugural episode of what we hope will be a very popular podcast. Phil and I were chatting amongst ourselves, and we felt that there wasn't really a podcast for venomous keepers and enthusiasts. There seems to be podcasts for everything else. There's lizard podcasts, Aquarius podcasts, loads of Australian podcasts. Both Phil and I have been long-term venomous keepers and field herpers. We know there's a big following for that sort of thing out there. So we thought maybe it's time we had a little podcast for ourselves. So you get the pleasure of listening to Phil and I waffle on about all things venomous. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Nipper. I've been a keeper of venomous for many, many years. And I'm lucky enough to be co-hosting with the rather fabulous Phil Wolf. And I'll just hand you over to him. He can introduce himself.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well put, sir. Our inaugural episode 1 of the Venom Exchange Radio podcast. There's a lot of venomous stuff out there in the ether, whether it be on YouTube or Instagram or what have you. And a lot of it can be misleading. A lot of it can be exaggerated. And a lot of it can be downright dangerous. So not to speak for Nipper, but I feel both of us have a pretty good grasp on husbandry and field work and ethics and proper safety protocols. And I feel that it's the time that, the two of us can kind of bring you as much as we can and bring on some guests that are even better than we are. And not to toot our own horn, but the time has come. So here we are without further ado. Nipper, you want to give us a little bit about how you got into venomous keeping?
Yeah, sure. Venomous keeping in the UK is probably quite different to in the States and in the rest of Europe. It's very, very heavily controlled. To own any venomous species at all in the UK, you have to be licensed. It's a DWA license, that's Dangerous Wild Animals license, and it costs a lot of money. And there's quite a few hoops you've got to jump through to own the venomous stuff. It differs from the US in we don't have to do any practice hours at all, which I think is wrong. I like the way that certain states in the US do it, where you have to do a certain number of hours mentoring with somebody before you can be certificated. In the UK, in theory, as long as you fill the requirements of the DWA license in terms of safe housing of the animals and a knowledge of their husbandry, somebody that's never, ever handled a venomous snake can get the license and the next day own a king cobra or a taboya or absolutely anything. There's no requirement to have any formal training with it, which I think is wrong. That said, I think the stringency of the checks that they do on your home and the venom protocols and bite protocols that you have to produce, I think that's very well done in the UK. So for myself, I'm a reasonably old person now. I've been keeping various reptiles since I was about probably 10 years old. My first reptile I kept was a ribbon snake, to my shame.
There's no shame in that. That's fantastic.
I know, but I've never kept ball pythons at all, so I'm not a proper keeper, you understand?
Yeah, you're allowed to say royal pythons. This is our show.
Okay, can I say that? Okay, yeah. I've never kept royal pythons, so clearly I know nothing of herpetoculture. But my first reptile was a ribbon snake. From an early age, I've been field herping. I've always our one of our commonest snakes is Vipera the adder. Unfortunately, when I moved out of London, the area I lived in had big populations of these snakes, and they're venomous, and everybody's terrified of them. And they're no more venomous than a copperhead or anything like that. And fabulous looking snakes. And I always wanted to keep one as a pet, but wasn't possible. So I kept the usual things, colubrids, loads of boas, that sort of thing. And then I started getting into rear fang stuff, because in the UK you need no license at all for rear fang snakes, which is kind of silly, because some of the rear fang snakes, some of the larger boiga, Toxicledris, anything like that can give you quite an unpleasant bite, but there is no restriction in the UK. So I, at one point, had a very, very large collection of rear fang stuff.
What do they constitute rear fang over there?
Literally, as it says, anything that has a rear fang delivery system, you can pretty much own.
So even like Western hognose is the same grouping as boiga?
Yes, 100%. Wow. There's the only rear fang snake, I mean, there's probably others, but the common rear fang snake that is on the DWA licensing is the Montpellier snake, which is Malpolon, and Malpolon ignatus or something like that. I can't remember.
Right.
The Western and the Eastern variants, they are still on DWA, but the majority of rear fang snakes you can own. You can own the biggest boiga in the UK without any license whatsoever. So for years I kept a lot of those. There's a lot of keepers in the UK that keep illegally. Because of the role I'm in at work, there's no way for me to keep a venomous snake without a license. I wasn't going to go down that road. So it got to the stage where I thought, no, I want to start getting into this. I want to do it properly. So I contacted some people I know, some great people like Peter Gibbons, who hopefully we can get on and have a chat with, who's a very well-respected keeper in the UK. And I've worked with some other people, trying to understand what it's like to actually keep venomous, because as you know, it's a world away from keeping a corn snake or something like that. Just in terms of the husbandry, even the simplest things are magnified, 100 times because of the potential danger.
Yeah, and you develop so many bad habits keeping non-venomous stuff that, God forbid, 100%. When the time comes, it's almost better to, I don't want to say this and be taken out of context, but it's almost better to train someone who's never handled snakes before in venomous keeping, 100%. Because if they've had years and years of harmless stuff where they're just willy-nilly opening stuff up with their hands, I mean, you see where I'm going with this, but sorry.
100%, I completely agree. But I decided I was going to go for my DWA license. To enable that, I had to sell quite a few of my quite a bit of my collection. I had quite a nice collection of some of the rarer tree boas at the time, various other bits and bobs, but I sold all of that, and I had to redo the snake building that I had to make it come up to the safety requirements of the UK licensing. Putting extra doors in, the cages have to be different, cage sizes are different, security of the cages is different. So I refitted my room, and then it was time for me to actually go and decide what venomous snakes I actually wanted to keep. Now we're talking a long time ago now, and things are very easy for people now with there's so many internet databases, there's so many podcasts, there's so many forums. There wasn't a mass of that around at that time. We're talking, 20 years ago nearly, when I first started getting into venomous snakes. But I did my research. I knew kind of the thing I wanted to keep. So I started going to the European shows. You're familiar with the Ham and the Houghton shows, the big international shows.
Oh, yeah.
Unlike the US, which seems to have lots of little local shows, it doesn't happen so much in Europe. There's big shows, and the Ham show is probably one of the, I think to memory, is the biggest reptile show in the world.
Yeah.
Happens 4 times a year. It hasn't happened for 2 years now because of COVID, but at the time it was happening 4 times a year. And then you've got the slightly smaller Houghton show. Ham is in Germany. Houghton is in Holland, and the Holland show, once a year, they have International Snake Day. And at that show, you can get anything, and I mean anything. You can get a unicorn for cash at that show.
Now, when you first started doing this about 20 years ago, was the tunnel already built?
Yes, it was early days of the tunnel.
Okay, so you could in theory drive across the channel and pick up whatever you wanted.
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's no point going on a ferry that's going to take you, 2 hours when you can go through a tunnel that takes half an hour.
Right.
Literally, for the Houghton show, door to door driving is 4.5 hours.
Wow.
And that's me crossing 3 countries.
Yeah.
To get, do you know what I mean? I'm quite fortunate where I live. I'm close to the south coast, so I can get down there. So I went to the show. I had some snakes in mind that I wanted to buy, and I got my first venomous snakes. What do you think my first venomous snakes were?
Oh, geez, it's so tough because I know you now, so I don't know.
I know.
I think things in my mind that. So, I want to say, Chlorecus.
No, good shout, but no.
All right. Man, I'll go Telescopus.
No, Cerastes vipera.
Oh, all right, curveball.
Which is an unusual first venomous snake, I think, because as you know, probably more than anybody, if you're getting Cerastes vipera, you are just keeping a little box of sand.
Yeah.
You hardly ever see them. Aspidelaps, some very nice examples of Aspidelaps, which I spent an awful lot of money on. But what
was a lot of money back then?
Oh, I want to say it was a long time. I want to say around 250.
Okay.
Pounds for this particular location.
Okay. Do you remember the location?
Some Springbok something, I can't remember.
Okay.
But the colours were insane on it. Absolutely, it was like a child's drawing of a little cobra. It was just fabulous.
Awesome.
And then after that, I was just into the Trimeresurus. I had loads, various white lips. My favourite, which I'm still kicking myself that I didn't keep. I had various localities of Punicius, which were stunning.
Nice.
Bright golds. And with those, I just learned the trade, for want of a better word. I took my time. I was very, very almost overcautious, which I think is a better way to be. And I just learned how to deal with venomous snakes for a very long time. I just kept to those snakes for a long, long time. And then it came to the stage where I was very fortunate. I met my fiance, and I decided that I was going to move to where she lived, which was a big undertaking in itself. Oh, sorry, slightly before that, not wish to put a down on things, I was diagnosed with cancer. So I thought keeping venomous snakes and having chemo and radiotherapy is not great.
Yeah.
So I sold pretty much everything.
A smart move.
If you're not on top form, you can't be dealing with venomous snakes. And I had some great friends that took animals and kept them for me, and was absolutely splendid. People so supportive. It was fantastic. Anyway, cancer's done with, done and dusted. I moved to a different county, and when you change counties in the UK, the laws are the same, but how they progress them are slightly different. So I had to reapply for my DWA license. So I reapplied for my license. I've got a purpose-built snake building in the garden because my fiance, although she loves field herping with me, she is not keen on anything in the house. So I have a building. So I had that constructed with DWA in mind, and I've spent a great deal of money on, because it's lovely to start from scratch and have slightly more experience and know what I want to keep. So I went heavily into Atheris. I've kept Nichii, Ceratophora, which I bred.
Nice.
Chlorecus, Broadleyi, Squamigera. Feel like I'm missing some. but I've kept all of those. I got more trims, so I had Trigonocephalus, which is absolutely stunning.
Crazy.
Absolutely beautiful snakes. I got some of the rarer Caucasian and European vipers. So I had Rinaldi, Eriwanensis, Lotievi, Orlovi,
Yeah.
which again, I sold the Orlovi thinking I should get some more, and now you just cannot get them in the hobby at all. Absolutely amazing, tiny little beautiful pink vipers, just insane. I'd love to get those again. Tried keeping some Berus. You can't keep them indoors; they have to be kept outside.
Really?
Unless you have many generations down the line captive bred. In my humble experience, I don't think you can keep Berus indoors. I don't think it works. I've got friends that keep them outdoors, have great success with them, but keeping them inside just doesn't seem to work for them.
Wow.
I got more Cerastes because it's one of my favourite genuses. I mean, I know you love them. I think they're absolutely insane. And a lot of the stuff that I kept was spurred on by the fact that if I was field herping, I'd see them in the wild, and then
of course,
the stories you want to see it. And then I seem to have gone down a little rabbit hole with the smaller American rattlesnakes. I just love them. So I keep two types of pygmy rattlesnake. I'm desperately trying to get. We've got problems with COVID, trying to get to shows at the moment, but I'm trying to get some rock rattlesnakes, Aquilus, Cloudberry, Lepidus, that sort of thing. So at the minute, the collection, my Venomous collection's not as big as it normally is because there's no shows. But I've got lots of Atheris at the minute. I've got a ton of rear fang stuff, and I've got the smaller rattlesnakes. That's where we are at the minute. Going forward, I'm trying to move on all of the rear fang stuff, the false water cobras, the Boiga, the Telescopus, things like that, and just concentrate on Crotalus, Cistruris, and maybe a couple of other little bits and bobs. But that's the way forward.
I like it.
So it's been kind of a 15, 20-year journey with Venomous. There isn't the sort of network that there is in the UK. There's very, very few venomous keepers in the UK compared to non-venomous keepers,
right?
Because the licensing is quite expensive. There's a fair few non-licensed venomous keepers, but as far as legal venomous keepers, it's a very small world in the UK. Oh, healers, that's the other thing. Healers and beadeds. I've had some fun with those. Managed to breed healers before, which is cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's on my to-do list.
Yeah, you'll do it, mate. They're not. I don't think they're difficult, personally.
Yeah, well, I got scared, and this past year was my first time trying it. And Rob Stone told me, "No, man, just let them fight. It's fine. They won't kill each other." And the 100%. Minute I saw blood all over the ground, I was like, "Oh, I got to get them out." So yeah. I chickened out.
I think the only problem you're going to have, is I think we've discussed this, is getting them cold enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got the chiller and all that, so this year we'll try it again.
Yeah. So it's a long journey, and I say I'm looking going forward to thinning everything out and just concentrating really well on species that bring me joy rather than having a massive collection. And the little, I mean, Owen and Keith and Rob and Justin have all just come back from Arizona.
Yeah.
A trip that I was supposed to be on. Unfortunately, COVID meant that no Europeans could enter the US. So thanks for that. And they have been absolutely torturing me with pictures of the rattlesnakes that they saw. Just incredible. They saw my most wanted #1 venomous species, which I will own one day, which is Crotalus willardi. But yeah, they had a cracking trip. So that's fired me up. I'm really motivated just to get a really nicely curated collection of American species.
I love it, man. And I know that when Rob sent you that photo, I could physically see your face. And it's the only way that I envisioned it in my mind. It was tears of joy with facial expressions of disgust.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. You know, it
Yeah.
was. I was so stoked when they messaged me and they said they'd found Rolado. I immediately was stoked for them. I just thought, what a thing to see in the wild.
Yeah.
And then about a nanosecond later, I was swearing, "You mofo's! How can you find it without me there?"
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny is he texted me at, I mean, it was probably close to midnight my time, you know, because they're 3 hours behind me and you're 5 hours ahead of me. And they text me, Rob texted me saying, "We got one." And then he just sent me a Google map thing so I could see where they were, but there was no picture. And like in my heart, I knew it was a ridge nose. And then like 4 hours later, I guess they finally got into cell service and the picture sent. And it was like I woke up in the middle and I was like, why is he texting me? Oh my God.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. So
That's cool. So, what about you, fella?
oh, so I don't I have been doing Venomous a long time and it's a long story and it's a drawn out story, and I'll have to do my best to give the abridged version of it. But I stumbled into Venomous herpetofauna on accident. Essentially, I was working for, I'd always been into reptiles. I'd had reptiles as a kid. And getting out of high school and going into college, I had worked at this pet shop. And as I was there, everyone would tell me, I was going to Underground Reptiles retail store at least once a week, if not 2-3 times a week, and just hanging out there and buying stuff from them, whatever else. And somebody said, "Oh, you should work for Underground. You should work for Underground." I was like, "No, I can't do that. I don't know enough to work there." And they're like, "No, man, they're just normal people. Go work there." So I went in there one day and I went in. I was like, "Hey, you guys hiring?" And the manager was like, "Yeah, we are. Here's an application." And you know, the owner Ryan, he'll call you and set up an appointment to do an interview. I was like, all right, I figured I'll be bagging crickets and killing rats and whatever else, cleaning poo, you know, standard pet shop stuff. And I never got a phone call. So I just went in on a Friday and the owner Ryan's there and he goes, "Hey, Philly, what's going on, man?" I said, I'm here for an interview. I never got a phone call. He goes, oh, you're the Phil?
Yeah.
Get to work. Start opening those boxes. And I was like, okay. And like, that's how I got hired. It's just like that. And I was working there for maybe 3 or 4 months. And Underground has always had a small corner in the back of their retail store that was devoted to venomous stuff. And they would have classes to teach people how to handle safely. Well, prior to my employment there, no one was really teaching it. It was just 1 or 2 guys that were friends of the store. They maybe had a snake on display. They'd go there, they'd clean some cages, they'd throw some rats in and call it a day. There was no like class like it used to be. I didn't even know the class existed at this point. And, you know, when I was a kid, I had rubber cobras in my mother's decorative baskets, and I would, you know, wrap a towel around my head and, you know, I would play the snake charmer, right?
That's not sinister at all.
I know, right? It's not. And I had all these rubber cobras, and I had you remember the old wooden, or sometimes they were plastic. It was like a chain link that was real long, and it would bend, and it had a little cobra head on it, and you'd wiggle the back and the front wiggle. So I had all those child's toys, and my mom was anti-snake, and she's like, "When you're 18, you can do whatever you want." By the way, she doesn't sound like that. That's just my information. She's like, "When you're 18, you can do whatever you want." Blah blah blah. Well, so I started working Underground. I see they have these animals, and I was like, "Man, that's cool, but it's too dangerous. I'm a rational adult. I don't know what I'm doing. I have no business handling them." And I poo-pooed it. So about 3-4 months into working there, doing the jobs that I thought I was going to do, cleaning poo, bagging crickets, that sort of thing. One of the guys that worked there, he's like, "Hey man, you're opening the store by yourself sometimes. What if something got loose? You need to know how to handle venomous. It might be a good idea for you to take some lessons and, you know, to do some hours, you know, get some hours." And at the time, the Florida license was only 1,000 hours in 1 year. So a lot of people were kind of coming in, doing their 1,000 hours whenever they could. It'd take them about a year and a half, whatever it was, and they get their license. And I didn't know any of this. I was 18. What did I know? And I was like, you know what? That's not a bad idea. And a good friend of mine had started mentoring there as the instructor. So I started getting a couple lessons from him, and I was hooked. and that was it. I was legit, no pun intended. I was hooked, and I had to know everything there could about venoms and venomous animals and just the different aspects of husbandry and keeping and breeding and all that stuff, and then learning about the geography and the localities and the ecosystems and everything that we love and we realize is part of this unique aspect of herpetoculture and herpetofauna. It slammed me one night in the face, and I was like, this is intense. I need to keep doing this. This is awesome. So I kept going more and kept going more. And then the manager of the store, he taught me some stuff. And that's when I met my late mentor, Frank Menzer. So Frank Menzer was a local guy who bred a lot of funky stuff. He had Hydrodynastus, he had Spitalaps, he had Montpeliers. I mean, he had all kinds of unique, eclectic stuff. He had actual mole snakes. The only mole snakes I've ever seen in the United States were his, and they were 5 foot long and thick as your wrist. They were massive animals, awesome animals. And I have a feeling that a lot of my affinity for African species comes from Frank, because at the time when I was with him, there was a ton of African stuff coming in. Kenya was open, Uganda was open, so we were getting a lot of really cool stuff back then. And sadly, he passed away from heart condition stuff many years ago. But at that point with Frank, he only spoke in scientific names. So taxonomic nomenclature became my life. And I realized that the guys and the gals that were keeping Venomous legit, they only use scientific names. So then I started down this rabbit hole. And
it's really different in the US to it is, as I say, I've had this conversation with other people. In the US, you rarely use scientific names.
Yeah.
In Europe, we only use scientific names.
Yeah.
Across the whole of Europe, and it causes so much confusion when I hear people on American podcasts discussing things. I haven't got a clue half the time, because what's named one thing in one part of America is a different thing in a different part of America. It's all, so I think that's fantastic, as you say, that there's a venomous community that actually uses scientific names. It's definitely.
Yeah. And excuse me. So I was working underground, and then I was dealing with the Venomous there, and I was learning from my late mentor Frank, and I had wound up parting ways with underground and doing a couple of things, working for my dad for a little bit, but I still maintained the Venomous collection at the retail store. And at the time, there was nobody teaching the class. So the owner said, hey man, do you want to take 2 days out of the week and come for a couple hours and just mentor or spot these guys, make sure they don't kill themselves, so to speak? I said, sure, of course. I love that. I love education. And I started doing the actual mentor program at Underground's retail store. And I would say I did that for about 12 years straight. And we went through a lot of people, and you could tell who was in it just to get, there was no Instagram back then, but you could tell who wanted it for, MySpace and Facebook. And then you could tell who's actually passionate about it. Right. And then I wound up taking a job at Strictly Reptiles, which was a wholesaler. And I had worked for a couple other wholesalers in between, because let's face it, South Florida is the mecca of reptile wholesale.
Right.
And I was working for Strictly for a while as their Venomous guy. And it was actually kind of fun, because the owner kind of let me make my own schedule. So I would come in at like 10 in the morning, bang out, 5, 6, 7, sometimes 8 hours of cleaning, and then go home. And I didn't feel like going in, I didn't feel like going in. As long as the animals were taken care of, that's all he cared about. They had other guys there that could handle Venomous, that could box stuff up and ship stuff out. So all I was doing was cleaning and feeding. But at any given time, that one room would have between 150 and 400 animals in it.
Wow.
And we're talking all different species from around the world. So the goal was honestly to move the animals before they would feel the effects of being at the same temperature. So we kept everything pretty much at 80 degrees. I had different substrates. I had heat lamps and stuff, and I had some UV stuff, and certain things got misted more often than others. But the goal was to sell animals. That was the business. So a lot of the stuff that I worked with, I didn't keep it very long. I mean, maybe 2 months, 3 months max before it would get sold. But I had the ability to not only still be able to teach at Underground, but work with arguably the most vast series or array of species of Venomous that anyone could ever ask for. I mean, if you name it, it came through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an amazing, chance to have such a huge grounding. Most keepers will probably work with, I don't know, 5-10 species in their whole venomous career, for want of a better word. To have that throughput is fantastic.
Yeah. And that's where it was very much a baptism by fire, because I had learned so much on the hobby aspect and the safe handling aspect. And now I'm not dealing with a vision cage or a vivarium. I'm dealing with a plastic shoebox. And the only thing keeping the lid on this plastic shoebox is the box above it. And because you have mass quantities of animals, and you learn very, very quick that there won't be any close calls. You will get envenomated, you will get bit, and now you have to be on your toes. And I jokingly say that's where I picked up smoking, because at the time I would work for about 30, 40 minutes, and then I would take a break. And I'd work for 30, 40 minutes, and I'd take a break. And I'd pace myself, because I had seen so many of my peers get into a rhythm where they're going and they're going and they're going, and they do another snake and they do another snake and wham, they get tagged. And that's kind of where I started to develop my training mantra on Venomous, is dealing with all the different unique and eclectic species. I mean, we had everything from basic monocle cobras to, MacMahonii leaf nose vipers and, Kaznakovi, and I mean, Australasian stuff, pseudo naja and pseudo haji, at the same time. So it was very, very unique. It was a lot of fun. And I slowly got out of that. And like I said, I worked for a couple other wholesalers, but I took about 10 years off. I kept a handful of cobras as pets, but I took about 10 years off from working for reptiles, because as Nipper and I have spoken about in the past, it's very difficult to do what you love day in and day out and still want to do it when you go home.
Exactly, yeah.
And I feel like, although I was still teaching the class all those years, I wasn't cleaning the poo. I was teaching people how to clean the poo. And I feel like that was a big difference. And upon meeting up with Justin and Billy and all the THP guys and everything, it kind of revived me. And now I actually have the largest collection I've ever had personally. I don't keep many animals, but I have a good array of different species. And my focus is now Africa and Middle Eastern. So right now I'm keeping a large group of Renkal's cobras from South Africa, different parts of South Africa, mostly KwaZulu-Natal, and a few of them from the Eastern Cape. I have a handful of Sarastis. Those are all going to be Egyptian and Sinai localities. I've got Atheris Squamangera. I've got Naja Ashii, Naja Nubai, Naja Haje, which is actually an Ethiopian locality in the red coloration.
Wow.
I keep a handful of Bitis. I have Pseudosarastes fieldi, which I'm stoked about.
Fantastic, yeah, beautiful.
So pleased with them. I have one Gila monster, one canebrake rattlesnake. Those are kind of like my Americana.
Okay.
No such thing. Yeah, right. And
no such thing as a canebrake. It's a timber rattlesnake you have, but beautiful.
No. This is a canebrake, my friend. This is a canebrake. And just recently, I picked up a neonate pair of Telescopus obtusus. So that, even though the state doesn't consider them venomous, I know that they are. And yeah, that's an abridged version of how I got into Venomous. It was not on purpose, to say the least.
That's what a fantastic wealth of experience to actually go through that. That's
Thank
absolutely incredible. Nobody, and I mean nobody in the UK will ever have that experience, because we don't have the importers in the UK for Venomous or anything like that. Everything is done in Europe, and then we will go out to Europe to buy that. So there's, except for the likes of Peter, who has a massive collection, very few people will have the experience of that many different species. We have people that are great with certain species and have a lot of experience with a particular genus, but people that have the breadth of experience that you have, very, very few and far between. Only people that work at the Tropical Medicines Hospital or something like that. That's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
I didn't know you kept bitties.
Yeah. Only area 10s and rhinoceros for right now. I had Nazicornis. I had Congo ones that were neon blue and purple, bright
Wow.
violet purple. I don't know if they had some kind of bug or if it was my neglect in some capacity, but they wound up passing. I'm actually going to be bringing my area 10s. I have a Tanzanian area 10s that I'm going to be bringing to Underground because they have uh, a mate for it that is 50% Tanzanian, 50% South African in like an orange coloration. So I'm
Wow.
probably going to try and pair them up. I know it's very late and Henry's going to yell at me. It's too late in the season, but I'm confident in my male and getting the job done.
100%.
So
You don't fancy or have kept any of the dwarf bitters before?
I've worked with Perengii. I've worked with wow, now I'm losing it. The many horned. Which one is the many horned?
Cornuta?
Cornuta. Thank you very much. So I've worked with Perengii and Cornuta, but I can never afford them.
No, they're
So
pricey. Even in
yeah,
Europe, where things
yeah,
tend to be a bit. But that's another thing. Prices in the US are a lot different to the UK and Europe.
yeah.
Venomous stuff in Europe, by and large, is much, much cheaper than in the US.
Well, I think too is that when I was just getting into this stuff, Venomous was so niche and it was such a small circle of keepers that all Venomous was cheap. It didn't matter how rare it was cheap. And I can't tell you how many times my friends and I would buy stuff for each other and just gift it to each other. My first pair of Legion's Cobras, Naja Haja Legionis, my first pair, they were just gifted to me because a buddy had bred them on accident. He was like, "Hey man, you want some Moroccan Cobras?" I said,
Wow.
"Absolutely." I think he sold them for $150. Now they're, $1,000, $800 a piece now.
Yeah.
Um, but what I'm noticing personally is that those animals slowly faded away, the quote unquote cheap stuff. The days of the $40 Gaboon Viper and $90, Indo Chinese Spitter, those are all done. And forgive me for using not scientific names. But now the importers are seeing their prices go up because the exporters in those host countries have the internet now,
Yeah.
and they're going on King Snake and they're going on Fauna and they're going on Morph Market or wherever, and they're seeing, okay, so I used to sell this baby Gaboon Viper for $25 to the wholesaler, and then the wholesaler would sell it for $65 or $75. Okay, that makes sense. But now I'm selling it for $25 and they're selling it on Fauna for $300. Well, I
Yeah.
want a piece of that. And what
100%. Yeah.
happens is then they call the American importers and go, "Hey, look, my guys have had a hard time finding babies or whatever. The price has gone up. Now they're 200 a piece." And now the American says, "Well, I can't afford to do that. I can't pay that. There's no margin in it for me." And they don't import it. So
Yeah.
now the only ones available is captive bred, which
Yeah.
just justifiably deserves an elevated price tag because of the care and the love and the TLC that was put into that animal.
Yeah. We're seeing, obviously, because of COVID, there's been limited exports from foreign countries into Europe. So we are seeing the prices rise dramatically at the moment. And there's been no shows. So, again, that's pushed the prices up. But even so, it's the disparity between the US and Europe in terms of the venomous prices is massive. But weirdly, the American stuff is extremely expensive in Europe. But stuff that I've seen and chatted to yourselves and other friends that keep venomous in the States, stuff that you are paying an absolute fortune for, um, is pence in Europe. I mean, Vipera amidites, to be fair, you can't give them away in Europe, really. And yet, they go for decent money. Uh, even the rarer Caucasian vipers, Deniki and Krasnokovai and stuff like that. Although they are expensive in Europe in terms they might be £250 each.
Oh my God.
When you compare that to what they're going to retail for in America, it's
I
crazy.
cannot fathom what Kaznakovai would go for in the States,
Really,
because I think there's only, and someone's going to please correct me if when they hear this, there's only 3, maybe 4 individuals in the whole country that have them,
really.
and only 1 or 2 of them have actually and are breeding them. and they probably paid $1,500 to $2,000 a piece for them.
Wow. But
So
then again, if you look at, let me think of a reasonably common rattlesnake in the US. Even your pygmy rattlesnakes, your Cistrurus miliaris barbari, they're still 100, 150 pounds each,
okay.
which I would imagine in the States, they're nowhere near that.
No, but if I was living in the UK, I could, in my mind, I could justify spending 150 pounds on a dusky pygmy because it probably cost the person that field collected it probably was paid $25-$30 for that snake. Then they had to pay for the box to put it in. Then they had to pay for the air pair. Then they had to pay for the guy to drive it to the airport. So 150 pounds sterling is, in my opinion, would be more than fine on an animal like that.
Yeah.
But when the animal is $25 field collected,
100%.
and you're selling it for 1,000 pounds sterling, that's where I'm like, come on.
Yeah. I would agree.
So, but it's all relative. I think it comes in waves, and there's plenty of times when the hype is inflated temporarily, and the market corrects itself. So, for example, some time back, I had acquired I'm not a mamba guy. I mean, I've kept every single species. I love them. I give them much respect, but it's just not my MO. I've had them. I played with them. Whatever. Not played with them, but you know what I mean. And I went down to Strictly, and they had 3 or 4 viridis in one Neodesha enclosure. And I saw some green tail coming out of the hole, and I saw some more green tail coming out of the hole, and then I saw a blue tail, and I mean sky blue, powder blue, just incredible turquoise sheer to it, right? So I said, hey, how much for that? And the owner of Strictly says, give me $150. I said, sold. So I proceed to remove said mamba, and sure as hell, it was freaking turquoise. It was it was sapphire. I can't come up with a better descripting word than that. And I bagged it up, and I took it home, and 2 days later, it turned green because there was a girl in there, and he was hormonal. So I went back to see if I could get the girl, and I said, hey, do you guys still have those other 3 mambas in that thing? And they go, why? Do you want that really pretty yellow one? And I was like, oh. So his girlfriend got sold, and I had him. So he turned green. We named him Archer, and we put him on display at Underground's retail store. And by the way, there's a reason for this lengthy story. Forgive me. So he was on display at Underground for about a year, and I realized that it was too dangerous to clean his enclosure. It was too dangerous to have him there. Let's just be blunt. It was not a room within a room like it should have been or like it is now. It was just in the retail store, and we basically waited for the store to close, and then I would take 20-30 minutes after the clock to make sure all the customers are gone, take the mamba out, clean the cage, put him back, feed him, whatever. And I realized that this was just too much of a headache. So I had a friend named Andy who lived on the other side of the state in Tampa, and he had a very, very large venom production line, and one of his key species was viridis. So I called him up and said, hey, man, I got this mamba. Do you want it? It's a gift. It's my pet. As long as you promise you're not going to sell the thing and you're just going to keep him for the venom line, I'll just give him to you, $150, whatever. He's my friend. He says, oh, absolutely. He says, come on by whenever you want. So at the time, one of my best friends was getting his pilot's license, and he needed cross-country hours. So I said, hey, his name is Sean. And I said, hey, Sean, you want to fly to Tampa? He's like, yeah, sure. What are we doing in Tampa? I said, well, we're going to put some snakes on a plane.
Genius.
So, yeah, right. So we took one morning, we left at like 10 in the morning. I bagged up the mamba, put him in a wooden crate, marked danger venomous reptile, locked everything. And I met him on the tarmac. And we flew from Fort Lauderdale to Tampa. My friend Andy picked us up. We went back to his venom facility, took the mamba out, put it away. We went up getting dinner. And then when we went back to the house, he's like, hey, man, can I give you something for the mamba? Something? And I said, no, don't worry. He goes, how about a baby Tanzanian puff adder? And I was like, well, I appreciate it. And I'll take it, but it's hardly a fair trade if you want to go tit for tat. And he says, what are you talking about? Look at fauna. And I went on King Snake and Fauna, and Tanzanian puff adder babies were going for $650.
Wow.
And I said, what is this? This is crazy. He goes, Tanzania shut down because of a chameleon problem.
Yeah.
And now you can't get anything out of Tanzania. No. And I'm selling these babies for $450 online. And apparently King Snake or Fawn or whoever yelled at him and said, your price is too cheap. Everyone's getting mad. You have to raise your price.
Wow.
So I wound up getting this baby puff adder, and now it's everything shy of 5 foot. But it just goes to show you that it's just a puff adder. It's
100%.
Not, it's a brown Tanzanian caterpillar. Yeah. You know,
it's exactly. We had the same thing with Atheris ceratophora, the little horned.
Yeah, all out of Kenya.
Yeah, or Tanzania. They used to be. You used to pick them up at shows for about £70, £100.
Right.
I had a nice collection of them. You move stuff on. You think, oh, I'll try something else. I'll get them again in the future. And exactly the same as you just said. Overnight, Tanzania shuts. No wild caught exports. The prices went from £70 to £150 to now to try and get one in Europe. You're looking at about £2,000, €2,000. That's beautiful crazy. Snakes. One of the cutest little snakes I've ever kept, which I will never keep again. But yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So let me ask you, just picking up on something that just popped into my head while you was talking there. You said, oh, I've kept mambas, but they're not my cup of tea, really. Mm-hmm. What do you think, why do you personally think certain venomous species are attractive? What influences do you think have made you like, I know you keep loads of hood tats for some reason, which escapes me. Cobras, I've seen them in the wild. It's lovely to see them in the wild. I have no desire to own one at all. They do absolutely nothing for me. But I know you are absolutely stoked to have them. What do you think it is? And I'm the same. You know, a lot of people, oh, rattlesnakes, totally dull. I'm super excited to keep rattlesnakes. Why do you think certain species pique the interest of certain people? What do you think the influence is?
Well, I feel that it is a 50%. It's the allure of the species, whether it be tales and fables, or old wives' tales of, oh, this is the snake that does X, Y, and Z. I mean, people love cobras because they have an oppressive hood, because they stand up, and because of stories like Rikki Tavi, things like that. But some people get these animals because they just want to show off. They want to be the snake charmer that they've seen in the movies. They want to stuff it in a basket and pretend to play the flute. Me personally, my enthusiasm with them is everything about them. Their nature. They're extremely shy. They're very curious at the same time. They'll do everything in their power to avoid confrontation. It is very much a kung fu aspect of, I'm going to do everything I can to evade this problem, to evade this circumstance, but God forbid I have to defend myself. I'm going to have the most badass way to do it, whether it be spitting or the hood or playing dead or whatever it may be. And I just feel that they've always fascinated me in that regard, is that there is an elegance to them that is overlooked for whatever reason. And then when the time comes, the ballet turns into breakdancing.
Very good.
That's just kind of my vibe on it. And to be honest, I feel like all the years I've kept cobras, it was a false appeal, if you will, because now that I have my wrinkles, nothing compares.
Fair enough.
They just do it for me.
I think it's really interesting that you saying it. When you was a kid, you used to dress up as a snake charmer.
Yeah.
And now you're a grown man, you're keeping cobras.
Yeah.
And when I was small, one of the first snake books I got, I don't think they have them in the States. There's a series of children's books called Ladybird books. I don't know. Do you have them in the UK, in the USA?
I don't know. I'm unfamiliar.
It was a massive thing from like the 1950s up until the end of the 80s or whatever. There's a series of children's books, and they do the Ladybird Book of Trees, the Ladybird Book of Butterflies, so on. It's literally everything you can think of. There's a Ladybird Book of.
Sure.
And it's really simply written, but the illustrations in there were really bright and really well done illustrations. And I can still remember as a small child, and I'm talking small child, probably under 10, getting the Ladybird Book of Reptiles.
Nice.
And on the cover, there's a rattlesnake. I think it's a Western Diamondback. I mean, there's been different covers, but the cover I got, Western Diamondback.
Nice.
What do I want to see more in the wild than anything? What do I want to keep? It's rattlesnakes. That early imprinting, it's really strange.
It
really
is
strange.
It is. And I don't even feel like you say the word imprinting, and it is imprinting, but we almost choose. We have the opinion, we have the taste, right? So of all the snakes in that book, of all the snake books you may have had, the Atrox stuck out in your mind for whatever it was. For
100%.
me, there was two snakes as a kid that I knew in my heart of hearts I was going to have: cobras and indigo snakes. And now that I'm an adult, I have both of them, and I'm immediately regretting my decision.
I've got to be honest, and I'm going to probably get hate mail for this and be shot in the street. Indigo, dry mark-on, is so overrated.
100%.
Just big, boring shit machines,
yes,
really.
You're 100% correct.
They're not pretty. Yes, they're great feeders, but so are a lot of things. I mean, I've got a false water cobra that will just eat anything. I just don't. And the prices in the UK are insane.
Yeah.
I mean, insane.
Yeah.
You could probably almost get Willardi for the same price.
They're about the same price here as the originals.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I just don't get it. And as I say, I've a lot. My friends are all got large collections of cobras, and they obsess about them like you do. Oh, this one's such and such, and this one's such and such. They all look the same. They're brown snakes that the only time they're interesting is you've got to irritate them so they blow their hood up. That is the only interesting thing about them.
And that's the crazy part is people always rag on me because the only time my animals will hood is in an extreme defensive scenario. My goal, my sole purpose is for them to live the rest of their lives comfortably in my care and never have to open their hood ever again.
That's great.
Now, obviously, it's not going to happen. I mean, my Ashes Cobra literally gnaws on the glass when I walk by the cage. It fucking hates me. But I still do everything in my power to make everything easy and calm. And, it's like I say in all my classes when we do the mentorship stuff is I made the joke about ballets and breakdancing. Venomous keeping is an art form. And venomous keeping is very much a waltz. It's very much a slow and relaxed and very graceful thing. And, people make jokes about Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. That 100% applies to venomous keeping in some regard. And so does any of the Kung Fu movies, Bruce Lee, Be the Water, Yeah, be the water. I don't want the animal to know that I'm even touching it, let alone removing it from its enclosure. I want it to be at peace and calm so that way I can enjoy it and it's not stressed.
100%. I think to be a safe venomous keeper, and I'm fortunate enough to have some very knowledgeable and experienced friends, yourselves, Scott, Ty, people like that.
Yeah.
And they all say the same thing. You say the same thing. The beauty of keeping venomous is you have to be chilled and calm to do it. At the point, if you're stressed, if you're tired, if you're under the weather, if you're not feeling 100%, you just don't engage with it. And I like the feeling of when I am cleaning or checking or whatever I'm doing, the venomous stuff, that is all I'm doing. I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about domestics, got to go shopping, got to walk the dog, whatever. I'm in a zone, and that's really even though there's a potential danger there, it is a kind of almost relaxing time because everything needs to be thought through, everything needs to be slow, everything needs to be calm. It's not like with my other snakes, I can quickly, I've got 20 minutes, I'm going to rush in, I'm going to open some drawers, check for poo, change the water, shut the drawer or whatever. Or with the geckos, I'm going to, check the food, make sure everything's okay. With the venomous stuff, I need to allocate time. I need to be in the mindset for it. And I think that's really one of the joys of Venomous done properly, is the fact that it is such a, I don't want to get all fucking Mills and Boone and wanky and go, it's a spiritual thing.
But it is.
It is a kind of, in today's modern, hectic, 24/7 internet type society, it's very nice to have something that you're so focused on, that you have to focus on, that it takes all that away. And I hope everybody else that's keeping Venomous has the same sort of ethos. I feel uncomfortable when people, as you say, are keeping Venomous because it's what the cool kids do and they can get Insta likes.
Right.
I hope that they are conducting themselves in the same way, not I've got to get that snake out for an Instagram picture.
Right. And that's something that honestly, it pains me almost daily being on social media, is there are certain individuals who are definitively doing showboaty shit for likes and follows. But I personally know that behind closed doors, they're doing it right. And they are doing it in a professional way, in a safe way. They are zen about it. But because of the, dare I say, addiction to the exposure, they have to showboat. And that's what's painful to me, is that I don't have many likes and I don't have many followers. And I'm okay with that, because I'm at this relaxation point. I'm doing this because I love the animals. And if the likes come, the likes come, so be it. If the followers come, so be it. If they don't, who cares? I'm still getting to have that moment with my animals.
Yeah, that's cool. The other side of it is the field herping side of it. I think that is a lot more dangerous than the actual captive husbandry of it.
Yeah,
because you have an element, or you have a large element of control in the captive husbandry of it.
Yeah.
When you're looking for venomous snakes, when you're field herping, and when you're trying to photograph venomous snakes, there's a lot of outside influences. I think that's a lot more dangerous, and it's something I love. I mean, I'm fortunate to have herped, as you know, in so many different countries. I'm really lucky. I've no more venomous species to see in Europe because I've found and photographed them all. Hence my wish to then come and photograph all the American venomous species. There's quite a few bits I want to do in the Middle East still. I'm not particularly fussed with Asia. I don't know why. There's not many Asian venomous stuff that I'm desperate to see in the wild.
It's because they're all green.
They are all green. Everything's green and lives up trees. It's not quite as exciting. But that is that's not a chilled Zen type thing, as you said. That's more of an adrenaline type thing.
Yeah.
But completely different. They're black and white. I'm fortunate enough to do both. And, I feel very lucky to be able to do both.
But I will say this, just not to cut you off, but you have, let's say you have Barbari in captivity, correct?
That's correct.
And you come to Florida, and you and I go driving down the cane fields, and boom, there's a Barbari right there. I personally have recently learned in myself, as a field herper, as a captive keeper, the different levels of adrenaline. And I feel like when I have adrenaline in the captive collection, that's bad, because that means that things went wrong. If I have adrenaline in the field, it's not because I'm in a precarious scenario. It's because I'm excited that we found it.
100%.
I feel almost more at ease to find for lack of a better synonym, a dangerous animal in the wild, because if shit hits the fan, I can just let it go. It's native.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something I never took into consideration before maybe the past 2 years, because I've really been herping more these past 2 years than I ever have.
Yeah, it's you're absolutely right. I can go into my snake building anytime I want, 24/7, and look at Cistrurus. I've got a fair few.
Right.
The first time I see one in the wild, I know I will lose my shit.
Yeah.
It's just so different. I can,
Mhm.
I can go into my snake room and I can hear a rattlesnake rattle. It's not a problem. The
Right.
first time, and I've never done it. I mean, I've herped all over the world, just not the US for some reason. The first time I hear a rattlesnake rattle in the wild, I know it's going to be like the first time I heard wolves in the wild. It's just going to be, it's
100%.
primeval. The hairs on my neck will go up. It will
Yep.
just be amazing. I cannot wait.
Now, I will say this because I know you are coming to see me in the near future.
Hell yeah.
I I have to tell you that it is what's the word I'm looking for? Don't get your hopes up about hearing the pygmies rattle because you honestly can't unless you're really close, like
Oh,
too close for comfort.
I
Yeah,
wasn't talking about pygmies
yeah,
when I'm up,
yeah, yeah. But I
I'm
see what you're saying.
talking, yeah, I'm talking more like going to Arizona or
Sure, sure.
even where Eric is. He's got a nice population of timbers or
Oh
something like
yeah,
that. Uh,
those Eastern PA timbers are just the gorgeous, the jet
yeah,
black.
but I mean, just any of those. I mean, to see a Cerberus in the wild, or
Yeah,
you know, to see a Cerastes in the wild. Oh, mate, it'll just be. I know you're 100%. Yeah,
I'm making
you.
hand gestures in a sideways motion for
Yeah,
Network.
yeah. I mean, I know you're the same as me. You have a real affinity for the genus Cerastes. I
Of
think they're
course.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And you've got Fieldii and you've got Cerastes.
Right.
And I've kept Cerastes and Cerastes ripera. I've not kept Fieldii. Um, but when I was in Israel in the desert, seeing the tracks of Cerastes and following those tracks, and at the end of the tracks finding one,
That's amazing.
it is just an amazing
Absolutely amazing.
experience.
Yeah.
It's it's just something that everyone that's into whatever they keep. I don't care if they keep geckos, even if they keep ball pythons, if they have to.
Right.
Um, Go and see what you keep in the wild.
Yeah.
It's just it's an amazing experience, and it'll also make you such a much better keeper.
Absolutely. I'll tell you that trip. I've herped the Southwest U.S. a few times, and I've done a lot of the Southeast. I've done some of the Northeast. Um, but that trip with Dr. Julander and Rob and Burke and Smitty, that trip I feel like was the first time I was legitimately out of my element field herping
Mhm.
because you couldn't just walk 1 mile back to the car and the road would take you out. We were literally hundreds of miles from anything,
Yeah,
and literally we're walking through an old bombed out microchasm of a canyon with a trickle of a stream at the bottom, and the rocks to my sides are reading 110 degrees Fahrenheit at midnight. And all of a sudden Dr. Julander goes, "Oh, hey, look, a rattlesnake." And none of us would have ever seen it had he not been up on the side of the wall, and just thinking, God forbid something happen and that Atrox did what it does.
yeah.
How the hell are we gonna who's gonna carry my fat butt out of this canyon? You know what I
That
mean?
yeah. I mean, I think I've seen it so many times on different herp trips.
Right.
People get so excited they find the species that they want to that they've been looking for, and any field herper will tell you the buzz. The chances of finding something are so remote.
Yeah.
And when you do find it, as you said, the adrenaline and the buzz of actually doing your research, the research paying off, being in the right area, and literally turning the right rock or being in the right place and seeing that animal.
Yeah.
The adrenaline, it's like gambling. Once you've done it a few times, you are hooked on that
Yeah.
100%.
Well,
And I
once
think
you've won a couple times.
once you've won a couple of times,
Once
yeah,
you've won a couple times.
yeah, 100%. And people forget that just because this is happening, it's great. We have found. I'm going to use De Boyer because this is where I've seen it happen.
Sure.
We found De Boyer in the wild, beautiful. Let's start taking pictures. and your whole world shrinks down to what you're looking at in your viewfinder.
Yeah.
And I see people and they get closer and closer. Oh, I'm going to get this shot. It's going to be fucking amazing. This is going to be my wildlife photographer of the year shot. And my Instagram's going to be amazing. And they're getting closer. And
Right
then
to
you
that
have,
Geo.
yeah. And then what you see in the little viewfinder is a lot further away from where you actually are. And you ended up with people with their hands a foot away from something that's so dangerous. You have to get back. What are you doing? It's just that adrenaline people forget. And as you say, I've been in places. My closest call was with a Vipera amidites, which is, it's a severe. It's not a proper, probably not a life-threatening bite. It's a severe bite.
Right.
My nearest hospital was 4.5 hours away.
Yeah.
I was at the top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere, in a country that, all right, it's not third world, but it's pretty close. We're talking Montenegro. It's not exactly at the forefront. There's venomous, watching, finding, catching, and photographing venomous snakes in the wild is very, very dangerous. I've seen so many people, there's an amidites, kneel down to take a picture. There's another one next to it that you're kneeling, and the same, the densities of rattlesnakes. Where there's one, there's normally quite a few.
I've done it myself.
Yeah, there's so many potential things when you're field herping. But no pun intended, it is such a buzz. You can't stop it.
Yeah.
Which is why we are going to Israel. It's going to be amazing.
110%. I am going to the Holy Land with my brother from the UK. 110%.
You will love it, mate. You will absolutely love it. It's just amazing. And as I say, I cannot, as soon as, unfortunately, I don't think the US is open now until mid-November, by which time it's not really good for field herping.
Yeah, but I wouldn't waste it.
Yeah, as soon as the season starts next year, I'm going to bug the shit out of people. I'm going to be over there as much as I can.
Yeah.
He's got so many great venomous species, and not just the rattlesnakes. I mean, I think you've got 35 species of rattlesnake in the US at the minute, I believe. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. 30, it might be 32, maybe, with subspecies, something like that.
Okay. Well, yeah, you've got around that. And then you've got your copperheads. Oh, man. How can you take all that for granted?
How about this? I've never seen a copperhead in the wild ever.
You disgust me.
I know. I found one in South Carolina. We had gone out road cruising on a rainy night, and I was like, it's pouring rain. Why are we doing this? And they're like, no, this is when the copperheads come out. You can see their green tails in the rain droplets.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. And 20 minutes later, we found the only snake of the night, and it was an adult copperhead with a green tail, and it was waffled by a truck.
No, man.
Yep. So that's as close as I've gotten. So I need to do it.
I cannot imagine living in the US and not having seen everything.
It's way harder than you think, sir.
Is it though?
You know what it is? It's not harder in terms of finding the species. It's harder for most to break away from their daily grind and make the proper commitment. And I'm guilty of it. I'm 100% guilty of it,
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I don't know what the total number of species for the US is. Do you know? Total number of herp species for the US?
I don't. It's a lot. It's a lot. Okay. I want to say it's well into the 400s, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the other thing too is like, it depends on where you live too, because like in my state is about almost 300, if not 400 miles long, right?
Yeah.
And in the northwest corner of my state, you can find 3 of the 6 venomous. And there are people that go and they call it the trifecta, and they find all 3 in one night. Some of them have found all 6 in one night. And that's just a freak anomaly. You know what I mean? I've been herping Florida for 22 years now. I've never found a coral snake. I live in prime coral snake habitat. I've never found one. So,
are you trying hard enough?
Honestly, I was for like 2 years straight. And then I was like, screw it. I'm not going to find one. It's the people that aren't looking, those are the ones that find them. So
mate, it's always birders that find them. All
Oh,
the cool stuff is found by birders.
yeah. Yeah.
But no, COVID. The last 2 years have been awful because I normally have around about 8 foreign trips for herping
Wow.
in a year,
Very
and
impressive.
I don't, it's my thing. I don't, particularly drink. I don't smoke. I've got to spend my money on something.
Right.
But I haven't herped since February 2020 outside the UK because we just can't. So I am, as the Australians say, I am stinging for a foreign trip. I need to get out there and start herping.
I agree.
I need to get out there to some foreign shows and start buying some more rattlesnakes as well.
Good stuff, sir. Very good stuff. Well, we're at 1 hour and 10 minutes, sir.
That's
Is there anything
grand.
that you'd like to conclude for our first episode?
Only just to let people know that it won't just be us two waffling on.
Yes. Yes, I concur.
We have got a great list of guests to come on and have a chat with us, ranging from some of the world's top venomous field herpers to some people that have more venomous experience than anybody else, to people who have the fact that the biggest collections. There's a raft of stuff that we want to get into. We want to get into photography. We want to get into equipment. We want to get into safe handling. We want to get into what we think of free handling. We want to get into specific species, specific genus, all that sort of stuff. So do tag along.
Yeah.
It's, as I say, this is. I think there's been a need for a Venomous podcast for a long time. So hopefully Phil and I will do some sort of justice to it. Don't forget to listen to the other podcasts associated with THP. Don't forget to listen to the Field Herping podcast.
Yep. All the NPR podcasts.
On all the NPR podcasts as well. And I think that's it for now.
Yeah. Well, we will see you, or you'll hear us on the next episode of the Venom Exchange Radio. I'm Phil, and thanks for listening.
I'm Nipper. Have a splendid evening, and we'll catch you soon.